clapping to the end. And then decide if you want to clap. I'm going to give the State of the City address. Most of you know me. I tend to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Lighthearted, sort of cavalier at times. But today I don't think I'm going to be that way. It's got a lot of serious stuff that we need to talk about on the direction of this city and where we're going. So, the first one where we were 10 years ago. And I hear a lot of this is that for some reason, especially in social media, 10 years ago, what have we been doing for the last 10 years? Well, let's talk about that. I think that's a good thing to talk about. 10 years ago, this is what we were. We were SOBs, right, at the front of the city. We had 7 SOBs. One burned to the ground, almost killed one of our firefighters and future council members, David Green. The building collapsed on David, and he was rescued out of the burning building, one of the SOBs. And the city began a fight to rid itself of these because they were depressing growth throughout the city. These are actual pictures of Kennedale roads. If you look closely, you'll see that they're not. Unless we've gotten mountains all of a sudden. But the road conditions in Kennedale were terrible. In a 2009 survey, citizens said that their number one concern was roads, the conditions of the roads in Kennedale. That was the number one concern. Traffic. This is right there on Sublet and Wildcat Way, that bottom picture. That's what that looked like. For those of you who remember what Sublet and Wildcat Way was at the time during the school, when it was starting out or when it was leaving, Joe, you probably remember this, the traffic backed up all the way to Pat Turner's house. Pat said he couldn't even get out of his driveway at 8 o'clock in the morning because there was so much traffic. It was terrible. Our parks. We had one park, and it was dilapidated. For the most part, it was Sonora Park. There wasn't much going on there, no restrooms. The playground equipment was old and outdated. It was a terrible park. Community involvement. We didn't have a lot of community involvement. I think that's Greg Adams right there in the back corner there, sitting by himself. And the other lady is Linda Havlick. Often we would come into a council meeting and there would be nobody there. No one would show up. We posted, probably school board members experience a lot of the same thing. And then what happens is when you make decisions, people go, you didn't tell anybody. And we said, well, yeah, we did, but nobody wanted to come to our meetings. So we didn't have a lot of community involvement. So we had a lot of economic stagnant growth. Not much was happening. That's actually a picture near Kennedale, down the street from us, of a salvage yard on fire. We were loaded with lots of salvage yards, and those tend to depress businesses, and they don't tend to bring in tax revenue. They're legitimate businesses, but the question is that citizens wanted to know, were those businesses that we really wanted to have? And here you see Apache in the corner that's been there for a long time. They used to have a truck lot right next to that, and the city was able to successfully get rid of that truck lot. There has been talk now at the council level of returning that land to Apache and expanding the salvage yard. I don't think that's the direction we want to go, but there has been that talk. Intergovernmental relations were non-existent. I took this picture of Joe and I back in 2009. Joe's the taller one, clearly. I was punching him out. We had no relations. The county wouldn't talk to us. Fort Worth wouldn't talk to us. And we wouldn't talk to Arlington. I asked George Campbell, who couldn't be here today, he's at a funeral. He was the city manager at the time. He said, oh yeah, we called Kennedale, but they never answered. So Kennedale was considered the city that you just ignored. So let's talk about where we are today. And one of the things I really want to focus on is social media myths. Social media has gotten out there tremendously. And a lot of the things that you see on social media aren't true. I was just reading a Washington Post article yesterday that the Russians were running a Facebook site about secession of Texas. And it was the largest Facebook site about secession of Texas until Facebook found out it was actually running by the Russians. And so they got rid of it. and it disappeared. But, I mean, this was one that was posted yesterday, and I took off the name, and it said that yesterday the city council had a council or city meeting because we didn't have a quorum. We were at a point where city business is being postponed because some in leadership refused to move forward. And that's not true. That's a lie. The reason that it happened was that Kelly Turner was working his shift. That's a problem. Rocky Gilly had an emergency that he had to go work at. And Liz is still recovering from some health issues. I don't have a sergeant of arms. I can't go grab Rocky away from a computer and say, you're coming to council meeting. I can't go pull Kelly Turner out of the fire and say, you're coming to a council meeting. And I can't pull Liz Carrington out of her sick bed and say, you're coming to council meeting. And looking at the council meeting, it was a fairly light agenda. And I know that Rocky spends a lot of time on city business. I know that he's studying these issues, and I know the same with Kelly and Liz. And if they have to miss a meeting because they're John, I'm going to allow them to do that because they're giving of their community. It's not because there's some sort of conspiracy. Newsflash, I'm not that smart. Many of you probably already know that. So ignore them by part of the Illuminati or the Freemasons or secret Elvis society. These things just happen. And let's do some more myth busting. I see my good friend Larry Atkins is here. Hey Larry. And this was Larry's post, and I love you to death, Larry. And I'm really happy that you're going to serve on one of our boards. I'm really appreciative of it. Larry and I had IHOP coffee for a long, long time, for about, what, 3 hours? Yeah. It was a great conversation. But Larry posted that somehow we are in financial distress, and that we have all these debt out there. The actual principal outstanding debt is $15 million, not $21 million. And maybe Connie Burton was shocked by that, but Connie also knows that cities are net donors to the state. The state doesn't give us money. We generate revenue to the state, and I know Connie knows that. So we don't need to win Powerball. Although I've asked that question before, Larry. Can we just take the money to Vegas and go gamble it all? Apparently there's laws against that, especially with my gambling tribe. So let's myth bust on some of this stuff. So how is it today? Here's a myth. The city's in a financial mess. Well, that's not true. The city recently achieved a bond upgrade to AA-, one of the highest for our city, our suburbs. We get a bond upgrade because our finances are in order, and that we practice good financial practices. Wait, that was written. Kennedale debt service is on par with other cities of our size. We do not have a lot of debt. I can ask Brady to come up a little bit later. He'll tell you that. George, our city manager, said this is about an average debt city. So we don't go out and borrow a lot of money. One of the criticisms of the past council was that we were paying cash for a lot of things, that we were trying to save up money and cash things out. Well, why do you bond? Well, bond is used to finance capital projects, like Little Road, Southern Road, Bowman Springs, Dick Price, water and sewer lines. We have to do those things. And we look at those first 3 streets. We did those first 3 streets because the county was doing a bond road program, and if you were willing to chip in half, the county would pay the other half. And so when you look at Sublette, Dick Price, and Little Road, those are tremendous roads today. And we got them at what? Half price. And when we built those roads, we also repaired those water and sewer lines because we expanded the roads. So we do that. Dick Price. Now, we haven't rebuilt Dick Price, but we did take it from its base and rebuild it as an asphalt street. And we bonded that out. Now, how do we pay for that bond? Well, we made a deal with our trash company. And for every ton that we drop into that gets dropped into their trash hole, they give us 25 cents royalty. And we use that money to pay off the debt on doing Dick Price Road. So the city looks for ways to really leverage its money because we don't have a lot of money. And Larry and I were right on agreement with this when we said, we've got a revenue problem, right? We've got a lot of problems, and Larry said that, and once he said, we've got a revenue problem. I agree. So, I hear this one all the time. Cities are like my household. No, they're not. Cities cannot be like your household. We have to put money in reserve, 18 to 25%. What's the savings rate in the United States today in disposable income? It's minus 0.5%. People really saving like the federal government does. The average credit card debt is around $9,000. Now you're thinking, I don't have $9,000 in credit card debt. That's true. But if you don't, then Jeff's probably got 15. I don't think you do. So we actually have to have money in reserve for this. So we have extra money. I remember a good friend of mine, Hollis Matthews, once said to me, he said, we need to declare bankruptcy. No, we don't. Who would accept that when we have a budget surplus? Nobody. Now, we budget conservatively. We don't sit there and go, we're going to expect a huge amount of money next year. Usually you want to budget with the least possible money, what you think is reasonable, because you don't want to get stuck in a trap. At the end of the year, you thought you were going to have more money than you did. Right? You've got to budget conservatively. So, let's look at fund reserve forecast assumptions. Wow, that's a long title, right? And I'm thanking Brady for this. Brady's a tremendous finance director. If you haven't got to know Brady, he's an Aggie. We'll forgive him for that. But he's a tremendous finance director. So we're going to look at what the budget's going to be looking like, especially our reserves over the next 5 years. And we're assuming this, a 1% yearly sales tax growth. That's pretty conservative. 4% yearly valuation growth in property. I'm really questioning the 10% health increase insurance because I think we thought 15 this year and it got to be 20%. Healthcare is really going to crush us, the rising costs of that. And we have looked for ways to pool to try to correct that. At some point, a 2% cost of living adjustment for our employees. Our employees historically been underpaid and they work harder than you could possibly believe. They're committed to the city. We're assuming 1% inflation and maybe $50,000 in new programs every year. So, recently we adopted a budget. That budget had a 1% tax increase on it, 1 cent. 1 cent tax increase. Wait a minute, let me be fair to the opposite part of the Jan was posting, is that you could say, technically, it's not a 1%, because if you look at the effective tax rate, the effective tax rate is how much money you need to tax to make the same amount last year, right? And so, the effective tax rate, coming out here, 74, 72, that's the effective tax rate, because new properties have come in, valuations have gone up. So you could argue it wasn't necessarily 1 cent, it was probably closer to 8% that we were seeing. But we're assuming 1% general inflation and $50,000 in new programs. So let's take a look at the budget. We adopted a 1 cent tax increase. This is what it's looking like in the next 5 years. The general fund reserve. Reserve is going down. For the first time since 2012, we're deficit spending out of our reserve. That's what we're doing. You can see it dropped a bit, went back up, and now it's on a path of going down. Now the question that Ms. Joplin had asked is, well, what if we go back to the effective tax rate and try looking at that? What the effective tax rate would have done is this. That we would have been into deficit spending by 2020. So we couldn't go back to the effective tax rate. It's an interesting question to ask, obviously, right? What is the impact of an effective tax rate? To raise the same amount of money that you did last year, but costs increase. And that's why, when you look at the effective tax rate, it's going to do that. Costs keep going up. So the other funds, you can see the water and sewer fund. This has always been a tricky one. The water and sewer fund fell, it was fairly high, and now it's moved back up, and it's continued to move back up. And we've adopted a new water rate that's going to help restore that water fund. But, at what expense? This is the expense. The street fund, reserve fund, will be empty within 2 years. That'll be gone. And what's happened is that we lowered the 1-inch rate, 1-inch meter rate by $20. We lowered sewer rates by $9. And we took money to pay for that. We took money out of the transfer fees for roads to pay for that. So, and it was high. I mean, we were up at 11% for roads, and that was out of whack for some areas. Certainly it was. But we took money out of that, and now the road fund is going to go empty here in 2 years. If you want to say that another way, we benefited about 200 homes in Kennedale, in newer neighborhoods, to give them a water break at the expense of the street fund in streets that we're going to repair streets where primarily? The older towns of Kennedale. And we're going to have to find money somewhere to continue to repair streets because they go down pretty quickly. And that's one thing not students, I'm in the wrong class. That's one thing that citizens will know is bad roads. It's a problem. It's got to be solved. Oh, and I should point out, the park dedication fund will be empty next year. So, in a sense, in my opinion, and others will disagree, it's only my opinion, we're going the wrong way in these fund balances. We have to turn that around. So let's talk about some other myths. Kennedale has been spending all its money on future growth. That's where we've been spending our money. Well, the fact is that cities should invest in future growth. That's what we do. All cities do. If you don't invest, just like in your business, what happens? You die. In fact, most of the costs of new developments are paid by developers and builders. We charge impact fees. We have an impact fee for sewer, water, streets, and an impact fee is charged to the builder before they can build a house. Do we have any builders in here? 1, 2, 3, 1. And the point of the impact fee, and an impact fee on a new house will run $5,000 to $7,000. That money goes into the city because if you add 50 new homes into a residential development, that means, is there going to be more traffic? Should old residents have to pay for that additional traffic? No. So the impact fee is designed to mitigate the cost that the city's going to have to pay to widen the road or add a turn lane. Or, for example, if you were going to develop in the southwest part of town, you're going to have impact fees that will help build a water or sewer line there that new residents will pay for and not older residents. In other words, what you're looking for is growth for paying for growth. And then when you get an infrastructure in a subdivision, if you were to drive down into the vineyards right now, right across from Woodstock, who put in all those streets? Who put in all those water and sewer lines? The developer puts that in, not us. They are putting it in. And they are adding customers to our system. And there's another way. This is one that's, trust me, it's a bit tricky. My new council doesn't understand it completely. Neither does my old council understand it completely. In fact, I was explaining to Joe a while back, I think. It's called a tax increment refinancing. That's what it is. Or sometimes known as a TERS. What a TERS does is it has growth paying for growth. And our partners are in this TERS, this interlocal agreement is the county. Thank you, Andy Wynn's office. TCC, thank you, TTC, you're welcome. And the hospital district and the city. Now, why, Joe, isn't the school board involved?
School district reaches a wider, different boundary than the city does, and we can't commit funds to that kind of development.
That's right.
It's not legal.
It's not legal. State law prevents ISDs from participating, so they can't. But these other entities do participate. So the question is, how does it work? And I'm trying to simplify it as much as I can. Here it is. I don't have a pointer. Give you an idea. As property values go up, tax dollars can come into the tourist fund. So, the city identifies, and you can look at it on a map, what part of the city is in the TERS. And that's primarily around where the racetracks are. So, when we created the TERS, the property taxes for the city, the county, and the hospital district and TCC froze at that level. Any increase in the value of that property, those taxes go into the TERS. So if you have a piece of property and it's worth $100,000, it's frozen at that for city, county, GCC, hospital district purposes. If it goes to a value of $150,000, that extra $50,000 of value, that tax goes into the TERS. And what does the TERS do with that tax? It uses it to build the infrastructure within the district so that older residents are not paying for a sewer line. They're not paying for New Hope Road to be expanded. That's going to be paid for by the TERS. And that's how you get money into the TERS. Then eventually the TERS goes away and the city and the school districts and everybody else gets all the tax revenue. So you're trying to make it where citizens who live here now are not paying for future growth. That's the goal. And that's how you develop. And so this idea that we've spent all this money on future development is just not true. We spend some, sure, that's wise, but we shouldn't spend it all. Infrastructure. The city has neglected its aging infrastructure. Man, I could use that for any city in the United States and the federal government and the state government. That's not true. For a city of our size, we've spent millions of dollars partnering with the county, again, when we talk about rebuilding roads, and financing new roads. And when we design roads with this in mind, to move traffic, to mitigate the speeds of traffic, to prevent idling, cars at a stop sign sitting for a long time, polluting the air, because as you know, this region is in violation of EPA standards. Reduce traffic accidents. One thing about roundabouts is that they stop people from T-boning. If they're going to have an accident, it's going to angle that accident and therefore limit the damage to the car and the individual. You're seeing more and more of this done. Why have 3 lanes with turn lane? To keep the feel of the neighborhood. Imagine if we would have put a 4-lane road down Subway. What would we have? A racetrack. Now you have a 3-lane road. And the studies tell us that what moves traffic is having a left-hand turn lane. That's what moves traffic. Because if you have a 4-lane road and people still in that left-hand lane trying to turn left, it's backing up the traffic. So that's what we do. And then we created the roundabouts. We've talked about this before. Roundabouts are wonderful things. This is how they work. There's no stop sign, there's no stop lights. Traffic is continuously moving. I would ask anybody who doubts the effectiveness of a roundabout to go talk to anybody who has to go to Kennedale High School in the morning. You go in the morning, that traffic moves like it's nobody's business. And you can get in and out pretty quickly. Now, I get frustrated too, because when people stop at the yield sign, I go, why are you stopping? It's a yield sign. And I want to honk my horn, but then I keep forgetting I'm the mayor, I'm not allowed to do that. That'd be nice. So that's why we designed it. And by the way, we designed the streets back in 2006 with citizen input. We went door to door, we had citizen meetings, and in fact, if you go out here to the roundabout at the high school, that was designed by our Youth Advisory Council. And has the Wildcat in the middle. They designed that for us. So we were involving the schools and the kids. Water, wastewater. Let's talk about water, wastewater. What have we been doing? Well, we've been doing a lot of line looping for the last 10 years. Line looping is connecting lines. A lot of lines dead end. And so line looping helps increase water pressure and prevents us from doing this, right? You see them emptying hydrants because the line dead ends and the water can stagnate there. So we have to flush water out. That's money down the drain. So we spent a lot of these last 10 years looping lines all across the city. And that's difficult to do, and it's expensive to do. We had one line break, it was 20 feet under, it was $20,000 because of just where it was. Here's one, intake and infiltration. This is a funny one. We call it I&I. It's a major problem. This is a sewer line. And what happens with sewer lines is they get old. And they start to crumble. And I think Jen would know this in her neighborhood. We have a lot of problems with sewer lines. They're old clay lines, Roots have gotten inside those lines and are cracking those lines. And that means water flows into those lines. Well, our sewer is treated by the City of Arlington. And the City of Arlington charges us by the gallon flowing through. So if you have a leaky system and in a heavy rain, what does that mean? It's more water into the system and we get charged. I went over and talked to Trey, the city manager of Arlington. And he said, Brian, look, we've got data that shows that every time it rains heavy, your flow goes up. I said, I don't know, maybe that's just a trigger warning. A lot of people go to the restroom. He didn't buy that. So it wasn't true. And so we've been working on fixing our I&I problems. We've had I&I problems with manhole covers, you name it. And that's a way of trying to reduce our costs. But when you're talking about having clay pipes from the 1950s, it's a work in progress. Business. Here's one here. Kennedale is not business friendly. I just look at that building and say, horse hockey, right? Because where did the chamber used to meet? You know, and I look at all of you. I can remember when the chamber started several times and failed. This is the healthiest chamber I've ever seen. And primarily thanks to, where is he? Jack Thompson. I mean, Jack has done a tremendous job. He's brought professionalism to this chamber. He's promoted a lot of business. And I hate to see him go. But here's your vision statement. I just copied and pasted off your page. You guys work closely with our EDC, civic and business leaders, and the Chamber of Commerce to recruit new developers. The city and the EDC are cooperating to build a business climate that will spur its transformation from a traditional bedroom community to a contemporary progressive city that's business friendly and family friendly. That's what you've been doing. Am I right? That's what you've been doing. You have been building that. And you've been doing that in partnership with our EDC and our city council. And we can look at some of these new businesses. I had the 287 bar here, but there were too many pictures of you guys in it, and I just decided not to endorse it. You know, Kennedale Chiropractic, Popeyes, Burger King. Here's some other business, Lee Engineering, QT, Texwood, this is in the last 10 years. There's QT Roofing, they moved over to the old church. Wonderful Fellowship Academy, one of the most beautiful schools in, no offense, Joe, in Kennedale. McDonald's, Fort Worth Tower, a tremendous supporter of this chamber, right? We can all thank Fred Moore for the work he's done for the chamber. SpeedFab. You know, SpeedFab has built a lot of our buildings. Carl Hall and that group have been very supportive. And it's not always been that way. 10 years ago, SpeedFab and the city did not get along very well. And we've worked to repair that relationship. And SpeedFab had some legitimate complaints. Smileys. I can't read that from here, but I know I took that picture. Or something. The Auto Parts store. We now have Spiral's Gym, right? I flipped out when I saw that. Watson Glass been helped to expand thanks to our EDC. J.D. Taylor Contracting, which I found a young picture of you, Joe. Southwest Annual Supply has just moved in here. Very nice. And I wanted to run this clip from Global Hydraulics. This is three years ago.
I founded and started it in 1991. What we do is we repair and manufacture electrohydraulic servo proportional valves. I moved the business to Kennedale in 1999. One of the reasons was that I really learned to love this town. The business atmosphere, as far as the city goes, they're great. They love to work with you. They help you every step of the way. Anything you really need or any questions you have in respect to expanding your business, staying within the rules and that sort of thing, they're here. That's one of the things I like about Kennedale. I've met a lot of great people here at Kennedale, business people, through both the chamber and through just being in town. Just stopping in for coffee at the gas station here on the corner. It's like a meeting place for all those business guys. They get a cup of coffee, chat, and it's really kind of just a hometown, kind of a business atmosphere. It really is. I would move here again in a minute. There's no doubt about it. I am Jim Coudet from Global Servo Hydraulics, and Kennedale is a place for business.
So, I think Kennedale has made great strides in being business friendly. We really have. Do we have ways to go sometimes? Absolutely. I agree. There are things we can do better. Always do better. By the way, that was filmed by one of our YAC members from 2009, Tim Brashowski, who went on to Baylor. I'll forgive him for that too. And now is back in the city. We've had a lot more new businesses in the last 10 years. Businesses are coming into Kennedale. It's seen as a place to do business. The fact is, the city and the chamber and the EDC have been working close together and to bring new businesses and promoting existing businesses. That's a fact. In fact, almost every new business that has come to Kennedale comes through the efforts of the EDC and the chamber. You recruit businesses. We don't get McDonald's. We don't get the ambulance service if it's not for the chamber and the EDC working together to get us those things. Now, here's one that I've always thought was really interesting was, and I've heard this repeated, over the last 10 years, the city's been run by a small group of people who don't listen to the citizens. Now, what are the facts of that? What I'm going to ask you to do, and I'm going to go from the last 10 years before this last election. If you see your name on my next list, stand up. Let's stand up, Greg. Who's going to go again? You have been part of this city. It's not me, it's not a small group, not all of you here. That's 200 names that I thought of just off the top of my head when I was sitting at IHOP. 200 names of people that have gone for the last 10 years. You have given your time, your money, your effort, and I can't thank you enough for all that you have done. And let's see what you have built. That's my dog. Markham Park, Sonora Park, redone. New Park, Rogers Farm Park. The 9/11 Memorial. People come from all over to see. The Youth Advisory Council. Every year we have young people wanting to know about government and being part of our government. New roads. There's it's like, that's Little Road. The Christmas tree lighting has expanded. We've upgraded our public works center. New restaurants. New pavilion at Sonora Park. Disc golf. My good friend Phil Wallace is really promoting disc golf out there. And they'd like to expand to 18 holes and bring people from all over the country to come play disc golf in Kennedale. The Wildcats. I mean, you look at it, we have a first-rate school system. You go to the games and people are there. It's building community. Now, I don't know about number 8 here. He's falling down. But I couldn't find a better picture. I was in a hurry. I finished this at 6:30 this morning. I'm not going backwards because I did the wrong button. There was a Christmas tree lighting in Town Center Park. That's community involvement. That's what we've built over the last 10 years. You've built all of this by your efforts, by what you've done, your blood, your sweat, your tears, your money, and done these things. So now I get to the question stage, and that's my cell phone number. I give out my cell phone number to anybody. It's not a city cell number, it's just not. It's mine. If you call me, you have to listen to Obi-Wan Kenobi for about, I guess, 2 minutes, because that's my voicemail. But I'm going to ask Brady to come up, and we're going to answer questions for a few minutes. So, questions. Anybody? No? Joe, you always have a question for me.
I'm just wondering why you skipped all the other businesses that I've seen come to town the last 2 years.
Because I was doing this off the top of my head for the most part, and I asked Jack for some of them, and I was also finishing this at
Well,
6:30.
look at all those buildings up north, and the H2O Supply.
Yeah, H2O Supply, yeah.
And all of these.
There's just tons of buildings that come in that we did not have before. Yeah. Do we have sin taxes? Yeah, we have sin taxes. Alcohol, cigarettes, but I believe a lot of that goes to the state, not to the city, unfortunately. Like I said, we are net donors. When you look at your sales tax, if you pay 8.25% in Kennedale, 6.25% goes to the state. If you get a ticket in Kennedale, chief, and the ticket, how much of that first ticket goes to the state? I think it was like $82, I think is what I've been told. So yeah, we're funding the state every time we get a ticket. And I'd like to point out, a few years ago, I was talking with the chief, I said, Chief, why have the number of our tickets gone down, the revenue of tickets gone down? And he said something that was really striking, which surprised me, because he's an Alabama fan, was that, what's the job of your police force? Is the job of your police force to be a revenue generator, or is it to promote public safety and public awareness? And he's right, it's to promote public safety and public awareness, not to go out and write tickets to get money for the city. And it really changed my thought process on that. Let's continue to do so. Other questions? Okay, I got a question. For Brady. Now, Brady, here's one I hear a lot about. There's a missing $1.6 million. Hi, Brady. You want to talk about that?
Sure. Back in 2014, whenever they were putting together the budget, the finance director at the time had an accounting error. There's a thing called construction in progress, and it's normally considered an asset of the city. It's all the building that's going on in the water and sewer fund. And that was about $1.6 million. And that's not typically something you want to include in your reserves. It's not really something you have access to. But in that particular year, the finance director did decide to include that in the reserves. It was an oversight, it was a mistake at the time. So whenever the budget was presented to the city council at the time, it looked like they had about $1.6 million extra in their reserves that really were more than the city needed and would be smart to spend down for one-time projects, one-time capital projects. So the city council passed a budget drawing down that water and sewer fund by about that amount. Well, as the next audit revealed, the city did not actually have that money in reserves, and then in fact spent down the existing reserves. So whenever you saw the water and sewer reserves chart earlier, you can notice it went from pretty healthy to near zero very quickly, and that was that year. Instead of spending what the city thought was excess, it spent pretty much all the reserves that it had. And whenever that was found, the city worked to move towards getting the reserves back up to a level that was acceptable.
Question about reserves.
So there's no missing money.
There's no missing money.
It just was allocated differently.
That's right. money. It was a counting error. And what it would have meant was that we would probably have to raise water rates soon. Now, no one likes paying high water rates. Agree. I mean, we are looking toward Arlington to see if we can work a deal there. And that's it. That looks like it's coming along okay. We'll be able to tell you more later when the negotiations get a bit further along.
How big is it?
Well, we're using park money now to help me out here, Ray, when I say we do maintenance on the parks
Fund ongoing park maintenance.
instead of out of other funds because we're sort of short-handed on funds. One of the ways you can do it is if we get new developments coming in, we still have some houses coming in. I think they've already paid their park dedication fee. We'll stop that money somewhat because they pay. You know what the park dedication fee is? Is it about $1,200 per house impact fee? Yeah, about $1,200. For every new house comes in, they have to pay $1,200 to a park dedication fee because it's more residents. Therefore, you need more parks.
So you guys voted on the bond, that, whatever it's going to be. How is that going to help, whether we pick it, choose it, or whatever, and how is that going to help get some of what's going on?
Well, I think we can tag team this one. We didn't vote on a bond. What we voted on was to have the revenue in the budget placeholder so that when we issue a bond, then we have the money in there. Yeah. And so once we get there, we can bond out, and all that's going to do is going to help us fix some issues. Like, for example, if we're going to make a connection with Arlington at some point, that's roughly around $500,000, I think $475,000, somewhere around there. We don't have that kind of cash, so you bond that out to make that connection. If you don't have that money as a placeholder in the budget, that's going to make it tough to make that bond issuance. And then there are some projects in here that we have to get done. 3rd Street has been one that's been ignored for a while and needs to get fixed. I mean, this is a pretty lean budget. There are no capital projects in this budget, none whatsoever. So in other words, we're not doing anything. You may have heard about the water tank that needs to be relined. We're not doing anything. We're doing that again, and we have no plans on how we're going to reline that water tank. It's a tough issue for the council to struggle with because, as Larry has said, there's a revenue issue here that we have to somehow address. That's what's going on.
Well, I think there's an important point to be made on bond indebtedness is in that when you use today's money to do whatever improvements you're doing with that, it's residents, taxpayers in the future that are paying for the benefits that we get today.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
So with that, my way, about 100 houses now, how is that going to affect this next 2 years?
You mean you're talking about over in the Brookstones, the vineyards?
I'm in the middle of three building sites.
Yeah, they're going to help us a little bit, no doubt about it, because you're going to get some impact fees from those. They'll pay for things. And impact fees have to go directly in proportion to whatever the traffic or water, sewer impact is on their city. But you're going to increase the property tax values. And the other thing is that the more water customers you have, the greater economy of scale you're going to have on paying for something. So, for example, we look at the water tower that needs $800,000 worth of repairs. Well, we have about 2,500 water customers, somewhere around there. And that means that those 2,500 water customers have to pay that $800,000. Well, if you're in the city of Arlington and you have 350,000 people paying into the system, and you have an $800,000 water tank repair, it's a much less impact on the residents. So growth, and it has to be smart growth, I agree. You don't want to have any growth, but it's coming, but we need to make sure we control it. And sitting back and doing nothing for 5 years is not going to do us any good. We have to be ahead of the game, and the council has to be future focused on how we're going to do that. And what's going to be that future? And I'm hoping that we're going to start doing another strategic plan where we invite you, all the residents, to come in and do it. Because it's not my job to tell you where the city's going to go. It's not Jan's job. It's not Rocky's. It's not Kelly's. It's not Liz. It's not Sanders. It's your job to tell us where you want to go. And that means holding neighborhood meetings, strategic planning meetings, and say, where is it you want to go for the next 15 years? And then it's our job to get you where you want to go. Yes?
So what are your plans as our mayor to help us continue moving forward?
What are my plans? You want to answer this one? Oh, right. Well, I'm up for re-election in May. I'm going to run again. And I'm not winning. I think it's an important time for our city. I think I've got the experience. I know what I'm doing. I think it's important that we continue moving the city forward. I'm always willing to work with people who are willing to come to the table fairly and discuss issues. I know Larry and I disagree on some things, but I enjoy having breakfast with him for 3 hours. But I'm going to run again, and I plan on winning. Yes?
I got two questions.
Okay.
One is the proposed hotel still on board to go in behind Quick Trip, maybe? And then I'll ask my second one.
Yes, the hotel is still on schedule, and everything's moving forward for the hotel.
The other question, Brian might be able to answer. We've got the floodplain that goes down Village Creek, goes all the way back to the racetrack. Do we have any, I know the way the government figures it is by contour of the land somehow, but we had, I'm going to say, a good 8 inches to 9 inch rain overnight back in 2005. Did we take any, document anything to where the water levels were then, and that so that the floodplain can actually be adjusted? Because that was a major rain overnight. I don't know if you remember.
Oh, I remember.
It was about 2005, I
Yeah.
think, that we had 8 inches of rain.
Yeah, they designed those floodplains on where it's going to go at a particular time. So yeah, they make those adjustments. And it's one of the reasons, maybe you've heard that we bought a house in a floodplain, because otherwise that house keeps flooding. And so at some point, what you want to do on the long run, and we're talking not tomorrow, not next year, but over about 10 to 15 years, is to start trying to clear out that area from the floodplain that keeps getting damaged, and probably just return it back to its natural state and keeping people out of there.
But did we set the flood?
Yeah, it's been adjusted by the,
maximum
yeah, by the Corps of Engineers. And I think the new plan is, and we can talk about this as well, in the past, when we've zoned properties, go take a look at Oak Hill Park, we allowed houses to build up back to the creek. If you go down to the Deegan's house, I think it's the Deegan's house, their house was falling into the creek. You don't want houses backing up to the creek because there's always going to be erosion problems. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to have your road next to that creek with a sidewalk, and then use that sidewalk to connect your linear park system. And you build your linear park system like the master plan, one step at a time. You know, when you have an opportunity to see something, you do. You got a chance to buy something, you can. And so where the drag strip is, if they're going to redevelop that into houses, what the drag strip would do is they would instead of paying a park dedication fee, they would cede that land where the creek goes to the city for a linear park, so that eventually it connects up to Sonora Park. Same way with the senior center there. There's a senior center there that we're being built. I think George is looking at a place there right now. They have ceded 7 acres behind that for a linear park, because it's in an area where they can't build anyway. And so we use those lands where they can't build to build these parks. Yeah. Good question. Now, my only other concern is, and my concern right now in city government is that we're looking too backwards. We're not really focusing on the future. And I still think there's time to do that, to focus on the future. We've got to. Our city staff is deluged with open records requests. I've got the city attorney's bill here. It's up $5,000 than normal. You know, you look that out over a year, that's $60,000 more than we budgeted. Our staff is overworked doing open records requests, looking for I don't know what. There hasn't been any corruption in this city since, I don't know, for a decade. We've been pretty good on doing that, making sure that we don't have corruption. I mean, we were the City Council of the Year for ethical behavior. We need to stop doing that. We need to start focusing on where we're going, working as a team. I think we can work as a team if we're focused on where we're going. Because I think every member of that council even the ones that I disagree with, have the best interest of Kennedale. They're wanting to get Kennedale into a good place. But we have to stop the campaign mode. And we all have to start working together. And I'm always hopeful we can do that. I really am. Because I tend to think the best of people. I always have. Questions? I see Kelly over there. She's clapping quietly, like saying, Brian, you're done now. So I'll wrap that up. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it. And maybe we'll see you next year. Maybe.